Hey, everybody. It's Ask Ellie, Intuitive Insights and your questions answered. And yes, the podcasts have been sporadic and not too often. However, I am coming back with amazing guests. And to start my amazing guest lineup, I'm introducing you tonight to Dennis Nappi II. Okay, Dennis, hi.
Hi, Ellie.
All right, I want to let everybody know who you are. You've got a beautifully long bio, and it's so rich with wonderful things. So I really want people
Thank
to
you.
appreciate who you are before we start talking tonight. So
Thank you.
Dennis is a former intelligence soldier and a police officer turned teacher. Dennis holds a master's degree in education with over a decade of experience teaching special education in high needs schools. Now, today, Dennis turns his experience and focus towards helping others on their own spiritual journeys through his books, his podcast, and Reiki. His long-standing show, The Seeker Podcast, explores human consciousness, remote viewing, and psychic abilities, the ET-UAP disclosure efforts, the impacts of artificial intelligence on human consciousness, and the nature of reality. So that's a lot. But
It
wait,
sure
there's
is.
more. Dennis is also a member of the Future Forecasting Group and the host of the Future Forecast podcast. The FFG is driven by the data collected by world-class remote viewers who set their intuitive sights on the impact of cryptocurrency on society. In addition, they explore mystery targets and gaze into the future every month to bring the news before it happens. Dennis is a Reiki teacher and currently building a variety of Reiki training courses, conducting virtual and in-person Reiki sessions, and providing spiritual consulting services to his clients. In his I Am Human series, Dennis delves into his own paranormal and psychic experiences, coupled with supporting research to present readers with a broader understanding of our own psychic abilities and the influence of external forces on humanity. In his fictional series, The Hive, he shares the journey of a man fighting for a woman he loves in a world overtaken by a virally implanted hive mind that affected the entire planet. And to learn more about Dennis and his work, you can go to the links that will be at the very bottom of the video, and you will have access to Dennis right there. So, Dennis, this is a lot. So, I'm going to start from the very beginning.
Okay, let's do it.
All right. So, what had you go from intelligence soldier, police
Mhm.
officer, educator, okay, into remote viewer and spiritual teacher?
Yeah.
Basically, I'm leaving out the teaching step.
Yeah, that's fine. And you know, Ellie, it's all connected. It's all been a journey. I've had these spiritual experiences my entire life. I was that kid that would wake up, with the sleep paralysis. It's like, what's in my room? What's happening? A lot of weird stuff happened around me as a kid. I've always had that intuitive piece that was present in my life. And when I was in high school, I'm trying to figure out what do I want to do for a living. So two things happened. One, I saw my first episode of the X-Files, and I said, I want to do that. I want to be an investigator and find, paranormal stuff and aliens and all those things. And then I read Courtney Brown's book, Cosmic, I think it was Cosmic Voyage was his first one. I was like, wow, remote viewing. This was 1997, 98 when that first came out. And I was floored by it. And I started reading Bob Monroe's work. I said, okay, well, I'm going to go into military intelligence and I'm going to go find, the secret things. That was my hope. It didn't happen. I mean, I did a deployment to Bosnia. I was working in a field called counterintelligence and had some great experience, some great training, some great opportunities. Didn't make my way into the secret alien programs that I was hoping to with the X-Files, but um, I learned a lot as an investigator, which I think really helped lay a foundation for me. All at the same time, back then I was secretly exploring the paranormal because back then you didn't talk about it. I was afraid it would be career suicide, and got out and became a police officer. And after some time, I was just it just wasn't where I belonged. You deal with a lot of hard things in those lines of work,
Mhm,
and
mhm,
being
mhm,
very empathic, it served me very well, but
mhm,
it was also very draining on me.
mhm,
And I encountered a 12-year-old boy who was threatening suicide one night, and he was locked in a car. He had a knife on him, and I could have showed up, smashed the window, pulled him out of the car, and taken him to the hospital and been done with it. But I took my time and I talked to this kid, and he's like, "Yeah, my dad left, and my mom's selling this car. This was his car, and I always wanted to be able to drive this car." And we just talked, and eventually I said, "Well, can you come out of the car?" He says, "Okay." So I got him out of the car and I said, "Can I search you?" "Okay." I mean, I could have done all this with force, but I just had a conversation with this little boy. And so long story short, I get him to the crisis center. He's like, "I'm not talking to that doctor unless Officer Nappi comes in with me." So I went
Mm,
in and I was a part of this experience. That really, really changed the trajectory that I was on and put me into education, which we won't go into too much right now. But through that process, I continued my psychic journey, my psychic exploration, and I had, which I'm sure we'll
mhm,
get into shortly. I had a pretty profound experience when my father passed, which really propelled me to where I'm at right now.
Okay. Can we talk about that?
Yes, you want to
Is
start with my father?
Well, I want to start with the experience that, okay, so you're in education, but and
Mhm.
you're totally passionate about remote viewing. You're an excellent remote viewer. People to whom, okay, look, people, if you don't know what remote viewing is, I'm not going to go into it right here. You can research it, Google search remote viewing. And Dennis, if you have any other besides there's Third Eye Spies they can watch,
Mhm.
they can look up remote viewing online and
Yeah, I
anything.
would, I would recommend, well, check us out at the futureforecastinggroup.com. That's where we're putting out content all the time on so many areas. It's fascinating watching like I said, I'm a rookie. I will always consider myself a rookie compared to the people that I work with because they've been doing it for 30 plus years each. But they have these amazing targets that at the Future Forecasting Group. Check that out. And then Daz Smith's website, it's remoteviewed.com. And Daz, I say, is like an archivist of remote viewing, and he's so passionate about it. So he has information on anything, practice targets, how to remote view, what to remote view. So I would start there,
Mhm.
remoteviewed.com. And then
Right.
Edward Reardon's YouTube channel, Naeem's YouTube channel, Dick Allgire's all over the place. I mean, they're great sources to tap into and check out, I think, to get some background on remote
Right.
viewing.
For people who are beginning or even people who are a little bit more advanced, but
Yeah.
to anyway, just if in a nutshell, how would you describe remote viewing? I mean, I have my own definition. What's your
hmm
definition of remote viewing?
Oh, good. I don't know if I've ever put it into words like this. I'm trying to think of what the other viewers say, but what I would say is it's remote viewing is using your intuition and going through a structured set of protocols to gather information anywhere in time and space through consciousness.
Oh, nicely put. Yeah.
Thank you.
My explanation is usually being able to see without your eyes over time,
Mm,
distance, and space.
I
So
like that.
that's my easy way to do it. Like, what does that
I
mean?
like that.
Close your eyes and just go look.
Yeah. Yeah.
Take
See
a
what you
target.
find.
That's yeah. All
That's
right.
amazing.
Anyway, I like to. You can see how my mind is going over here. All right. Tell me what it was that had you then basically really go into this world of psychic phenomena, remote viewing.
Yeah.
Usually, there's a story there.
Yeah, this was, and this led to my big book, Food for the Archons. My father, I was very close with my father. He got diagnosed with cancer, and 6 months later, he was gone. But it was such a slow, torturous, horrible process. I was there with him every step of the way, as he just withered away and passed. And at the very end of his life, and I'm saying like down to the last week, down to the last hours, a lot of weird things started happening. My dad he was having these dreams that he was telling us about where he was seeing strange beings in the backyard, which was consistent with stuff that like my mom, my brother, and I had our whole life, but never my dad. So he's having these pathetic dreams. My dad and I had a shared dream one night. It was like an apocalyptic type of dream, which I think we knew that this was coming on a subconscious or spiritual level. And then as he was really suffering one day, um, the house next door to us, it was empty, it was vacant, it had been vacant for years. The garage door just started shaking. Like
Mm,
we thought there was a bear. We were in the Poconos, in the Pocono Mountains. We thought there was a bear inside the garage. We called security, the security agency. They came through, they checked the house. They said, "There's nothing wrong. The garage door is not making any noise," and they left. My
mhm.
dad's continuing to suffer, and the door would continue to shake every so often and just rattle. There was a malfunction with the garage door opener, but because the garage was locked, it just kept raising and rattling. Once my
Mhm.
dad died, it never did it again. So there
Mhm.
was that piece that was going on.
Mhm.
Um, I'd be sitting down, my that father was in the room right behind me. I'd sit down, with my back to him as I was like eating breakfast or something. And I'd feel he'd get up and he'd walk past me. And I'm like, my dad can't walk anymore. And I turn around, he's laying in bed, but I swear I felt, did you ever feel just somebody around or when you meditate? So at this point, he was nonverbal, but he could still communicate with head nods and eye blinks. And I said, Dad, are you having dreams that you're walking around the house? And his eyes open real big and he nodded to me. He was having out of body experiences.
Mhm.
And I was feeling that, I was perceiving that. And then towards the very end, the last day, he was having a series of strokes. He was in a lot of pain. And I remember he was screaming. And in the middle of it, I just had this random flash of a scene from the movie from Full Metal Jacket
Mhm.
where a soldier, a Marine goes down by a sniper, and then everybody kept trying to rescue him, but they kept getting shot. And I had this connection in my mind of this is the energy, my father's the wounded, soul. And every time he's upset and screams, because he wouldn't die, he just wouldn't die. Um, my family was putting out more emotional energy. And so I just had this perception of like, I think there's something else going on, and I think it's feeding off of our energy here, which is a crazy thought. So after my father died and I thought that I was going crazy, I set out to prove, number one, is it really possible to get psychic data? Is this a real thing? And if it's real, is the information I'm getting from that, is that valid and accurate? So I start doing this research and that's when I came across SRI, the Stanford
Mhm.
Research Institute. For people who aren't familiar with remote, like there's real science behind
Mhm.
remote viewing. It's not pseudoscience. It's not things you see on like this is real. And
Mhm.
there's solid research with well-credentialed people, government agencies. I mean, the government, I know as soon as you say government, people think, oh, a conspiracy, but the CIA, the military, the DIA, they took over this program for 20 years out of Stanford and were running remote viewing programs.
Mhm.
So when I started to find that, I said, oh my goodness, like this is something here. And I just continued working on this project for about 5 years. And every time I would look into something that I thought this is crazy, I found more either credible research or credible people who were having the same experiences throughout life. My thesis of this was basically we're all psychic. We all
Mhm.
have this ability that's been forgotten. And
Mhm.
there are external forces that have the ability to manipulate us due to our ignorance of what's going on around us. And it acts as energetic nourishment for these things around us. So I wrote this book basically coming into this going with the prison planet narrative because I was traumatized from what happened to my father. Like we're hopeless. There's nothing we can do. And as I went through this journey, because the beginning of the book's pretty heavy, as I went through this journey, I found no, this is a beautiful thing. We have this power, we have this ability, and during that process, I got attuned into Reiki and I started having these other experiences that were positive and healing. And I was like, oh my gosh, not only is that my reading about it, my researching it, I'm doing it now with control.
Mhm.
And then, we can get into this later. And then years later, I ended up connecting with the remote viewers at the then crypto viewing, now future forecasting, and learning to remote view myself.
Mhm.
So it's
Mhm.
no longer reading about it. It's I can go out and do it now. And,
Right.
and it's just been
Right.
a fascinating experience through all that.
Yeah, and I love, of course, no one likes to hear about anybody's family
Right.
tragedies and all of that. Only, I we are so connected, and I do believe that I'm not the only one. Nah, I just believe that all of our experiences, are for the benefit of our own self-development, also our spiritual development. We are
Yeah.
these spiritual beings, blah blah, cliche, in the human body, and we forget that we're in the body, and
Hmm.
um, or we're not in our body most of the time. We're kind of out there, not connected.
Yeah.
However, when people really do pay attention, and I don't mean to be lecturing, I'm just reminding people who are listening, when we do pay attention, we're going to see that it's way more than synchronicities that are lining up there for us. And
Yeah.
again, one of the things that we teach, right, in remote viewing, and I'm sure in your programs also, is awareness,
Yeah.
consciousness and awareness. Without it, you know, anything could happen right next to you and you're not
Yeah.
going to see it because you're not paying attention.
That's
You're not aware.
Yeah, that's a great point, Ellie. And what I've noticed, especially in the beginning, usually sometimes it's big, but for the most part, intuitive psychic signals are so subtle and they're easily dismissed. If we're not learning to pay attention of what's going on in our minds and our bodies and our awareness, we can miss them so easily. It's not
Mhm.
until you start paying attention and going, wait a minute, I knew who was going to call. What did that feel like? Where in my body did I feel that? When did I start getting that signal? And you start going back, you can strengthen your recognition of those signals when they come in. But it's such a subtle thing, and you can easily miss it if you're not paying attention. But I think once you start paying attention, you also start recognizing when these signals come in that are not serving you well. And you can, whoa, nope, that's not good for me. It's like walking into a room where something smells bad, right? You can make a choice. I'm not going in there, or I'm going to spray an air freshener. You start getting an intuitive signal that doesn't feel good. I'm going to
Right,
take action and protect myself from it.
right. And then, yeah, then there are sometimes I don't know about you, sometimes I forget to do that. Okay, like it's like
Hmm.
I just forget to do it. Oh, like, okay.
Yes. Yep.
Um, wow. Um, I wanted to ask you a question,
Mhm.
really. Tell us about, tell us a little bit right now about tell us about all right, let's go into this. Can you tell us a little bit about what you think? And this is, maybe I don't mean to be putting you on the spot or anything,
That's
but I
fine.
would love to hear your views on the impact of artificial intelligence on human consciousness and the
Yeah,
nature of reality. If you're open to it, otherwise we'll go
I
straight.
am.
Okay, all right.
No, this is kind of what a lot of my earlier podcasts were about, and I still like to dive into this. Um, I've always just wanted to know things and understand things, and podcasting and writing, I always say it's been a therapeutic way for me to understand things, and it happened to be enjoyable for other people to listen to me, read something and try to process it. And that's what a lot of my podcasts were, was looking at these news articles. And early on, I started reading about the development of AI. And of course, it starts out the doom and gloom, Skynet, it's going to take over, it's going to destroy the world, it's going to take over humanity. All that stuff, you can get sucked into that thread right there. But I started seeing some commonalities with artificial intelligence in looking at, what are we doing? We're creating a machine, something, an intelligence to serve us, right? To honor us, to serve us, to really be enslaved by us, for a variety of different reasons. And you think back to the ancient, the creation myths, right, of the gods, the Anunnaki, and even I think the I can't remember the name of it, the Popol Vuh, the Mayan creation myth. There's an Aztec myth. It's all about the gods creating man to serve them and to work for them. And I'm going, man, this is really similar, in terms of, are we repeating history? Is this what happened to us? Are we are we an advanced form of tech, of AI? So I started going down that thread, and it really started connecting a lot of dots for me. It was just a fun thought experiment to go through, in exploring that. And at the same time, as I'm writing this book, I'm looking at, again, the nature of reality, tying it into things like artificial intelligence. And I'm looking at the Gnostic texts, and I'm seeing all these correlations between it. I'm looking at, in the Nag Hammadi, we have what's called the Book of Zostrianos. And Zostrianos, you don't hear about him a lot, but he's a really cool guy. He was a truth seeker. I relate to him like that. Just those of us who are on that spiritual quest, we know there's something more. And he
Mhm.
was so frustrated. He's like, I give up. I'm gonna throw myself in the wild, let the beasts come eat me. I'm done. I can't figure this out. And I can't remember the exact wording, so if the scholars out there, please forgive me. But an angel or somebody came down. It's like, all right, don't end it all. We're gonna show you some stuff. And what they go through and describe, they talk about aeons, aeons, eons. Everybody says it differently, but and what they are basically they're conscious intelligent entities, but they're also systems of reality where things can
Mm,
exist within them.
mhm.
At least that's how I interpret it. And they're showing him these different realms and these different aeons. And then they get into this section where they're showing him aeonic copies. Now, the wording, I read this probably 200 times trying to understand it. It's just one of those things. It's written in the older languages, you know, just trying to understand it. I'm reading the English translations, but it's hard. And basically what it says is that a copy of the soul will go into this aeonic copy, but that soul believes it to be the true self until it attains the light of truth, and then it merges back with the original self. So I stepped out
Yeah,
of that
you
and I
gotta,
went,
well, hold on, you gotta share that again so that we can all take
yes,
that in,
okay,
and then you can take it in for us.
okay, let's try that again. And I'm probably going to say it different because it's
It's okay.
complicated in my head.
It's
But
okay.
basically,
Mhm.
as they're showing Zostrianos all these realms and the aeons and the reality systems, they showed him aeonic copies. And
Mhm.
an aeonic copy is basically a copy of your current world, but you take a copy of your soul and it gets implanted in this aeonic copy. And the soul then has to obtain the light of truth. It has to learn a lesson. And then once it
Mhm.
learns that lesson, it then absorbs back with the actual self. But the soul, that copy, believes itself to be the actual self. It doesn't know that it's a copy.
Mhm.
I thought,
Mhm.
wow, let's
Yeah.
explain that in modern day terms. I'm going to sit here, I'm going to upload part of my consciousness to a virtual world. It's going to go through some trials and tribulations and learn something. And then I'm going to get a download and have that information right away. You know, how many of us out there have had what we call downloads now, where all of a sudden you have that clear cognizant moment? It's like, I know stuff. I don't know how I know this. Let me look it up on Google. Oh my goodness, that was right. So I'm looking at that. I'm going, wow, this was the Nag Hammadi was buried over 2,000 years ago. They found it in the 40s. They found these scrolls in these clay jars um, back in the 40s. And the great thing about this is these were unedited documents. They're about 2,000 years old, at least, unedited from the older text, from what little has survived. Compared to what, you know, modern day, some of these scripts have become, it's gone through many hands and many minds as they interpret them. This was more raw. Here's what we have here. So they're talking about virtual reality then. And I'm digging and I'm digging and I'm going, okay, this makes sense. And then you come across Nick Bostrom. And Nick Bostrom is of he was with Oxford and he has the simulation argument. I can never get this one right. This is why I write. I write it all down. But so I'm going to summarize. And again, for people out there, I know I'm not going to get it perfect, but here's the gist of it is that what he's saying with the simulation argument, he gives like two or three conditions, but ultimately he's saying eventually he says if a civilization reaches a level of technological advancement and that civilization decides to run ancestor simulations, those ancestor simulations will also run ancestor simulations at some point, and it extrapolates and extrapolates and extrapolates, right? So basically saying, you know, like let's take us today. We're getting to a point of technological advancement. We are look at all the data we collect from your traffic, from your phones, from like, all the movement data, everything that we do online. We could create a universe right now
Mhm.
with all of this data that
Mhm.
comes in.
Mhm.
What Nick Bostrom is saying is that the chances of us being the original base reality are far less than the chances of us being the copy. And we would never know that we're the copy. So, you know, and I have a bunch of other sources that I went into in the book that just credible people, a piece here, a piece there, tying it all in. And then I look at my own experiences in life and it's like, yeah, you know, I've interviewed people who they shift consciousness and they're in another world, you know, for
Mhm.
X amount of time, having real
Mhm.
experiences with full autonomy. There's
Mhm.
just so many things where, you know, I think we're just starting to scratch the surface of what reality is. And I think we're, whether it's technology or spiritual, I think that, which I think is ultimately one and the same at some point. I think we're several layers down at this point, honestly.
Yeah, interesting. I always just, yeah, I usually just leave it as, consciousness is reality. Consciousness
Yeah.
creates reality. That's kind of like,
Yeah.
that's my baseline. I don't go a little bit too deep into all of this. Okay, so it's
Yeah.
been fascinating for me. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I used to think that, well, I'm not even going to say I used to. I still think sometimes, when I start wondering, like, oh, here we are, these humans, and we have all this ability and we all have all these powers and we can all do this. Then I also say to myself, what if? What if? So this is just a thought that I entertain. Um, if we talk in psychology, there are two things that humans all share, okay? And one of them is this fear, am I good enough, right? This goes,
Hmm.
this psychology, this psychological fear. Am I good
Right.
enough? Am I really good enough? Can I do this? Am I good enough? It's always, no matter who you are, no matter how qualified you are, that little thing in the back is always nagging. Can I do this?
Hmm.
Am I good enough? And then there's another one. Will people like me? Will anybody like me? Am I loved? Okay.
Right.
So there have been studies done, and these two things in psychology, these two questions, these unanswered questions in psychology go across all cultures that
Hmm.
um, anthropologists, sociologists have looked into. So one day I was thinking, what if what if those two things were implants? Okay, like what if they
Hmm.
were just like really little implants, like neurological implants causing those two thoughts? Am I good enough? Will anybody love me? And if I have those two implants, I won't use all the rest of my abilities because I
Hmm.
would be holding myself back from remote
Hmm.
viewing, um, out of bilocating, using
Right.
telekinesis. So I wouldn't have, am I looking good? Does anybody love me? And I often wonder, what if there are two little implants back there somewhere, somehow, keeping
Mm.
us from our full human potential? Because, we have it. We have.
Yes. I think that's a excellent question, and I'm reminded of two things to address that, which I think you could possibly be spot on, and I don't know. I mean, it's fun to
Who
speculate and
knows, right? Who
explore these things.
knows?
But Bob Monroe, in his book Far Journeys, it was his second book. I think he has Journeys Outside of the Body, Far Journeys, and then Ultimate Journeys. It was his second book. He has this experience where he's out of body and he's learning about the nature of reality through his perspective. And he's shown what, when you read it, it's like, wow, this is a different version of the Garden of Eden story. And what
Mhm,
he's seeing is basically that life was created on this planet to produce a special form of energy that they refer to as loosh. Loosh
mhm,
is that desired energy that these creators feed off of or use to power their society or civilization. I'm not sure. But what he's finding through this experience of learning is that they call it the gardener. Um, the more the life forms suffered, the more loosh was produced. And
mm,
as they're going through this learning process, this gardener, they find that fear was an excellent source of it. The next best source of it was loneliness. Loneliness was an incredible source of purified loosh, but the
wow.
best source of purified loosh was giving man or giving this life form, because he didn't refer to him as man, we said giving this life a glimpse of the divine but never actually allowing him to see it, keeping it just out of his reach. And he said the production of pure loosh from that aspect was incredibly strong
Wow.
and powerful. So you have
Wow.
your loneliness piece, am I good enough? And, am I loved? Trying to connect with the divine there. And then I think about, just to piggyback on what else you said, the distraction piece in the back in the Gnostic texts is the hypostasis of the archons. And that's another Garden of Eden story that's slightly different, talks about um, you know, how mankind was created and separated, and the snake came down and actually liberated their minds. But ultimately, once mankind understood that they were like the gods, the archons or the lords or the rulers threw them out of the garden. And then it says, and they threw them into a life of chaos so they could no longer be preoccupied with matters of the Holy Spirit. And that really resonates with me with
Wow.
how distracting our life. I mean, how hard is it
Mm.
to develop spiritually when, like for me, I've got three kids, I've got a job, I've got another job.
Mhm.
How it's almost impossible to find the time. I mean, it takes a lot of dedication to say, I'm going to develop this, because there's so much challenge and hardship in this world sometimes. I think
Mhm.
that's the test. So that really rings strongly with me.
Oh, that is fascinating. We're going to have to dive deeper into that after I do some homework and research. I love learning. Okay.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
Oh my God, Dennis, where do we go from here? That's powerful because that alone for me, just like I don't have I'm gonna be honest, I don't have enough information on that, but just
Mhm.
now you have just, um
That and
some parts of my
I'm not
brain
trying to
over
just
here.
what's that?
You've lit up parts of my brain, like I've got work to do.
Oh,
It's like,
I'm
oh,
so happy. And that was why I wrote this, this book, Food for the Archons. This is all this stuff I'm sharing is coming from that research. Um, I wanted to I wanted to understand what was in my head. I mean, this all started for me in 2009, before my dad died. I started getting these downloads, this information, this understanding the nature of reality. I had this crazy night. I was up all night and I just couldn't sleep, and I had these thoughts that didn't make sense. So I sat down and I wrote this essay. It was, I guess it was like automatic writing. I'd never done that before,
mhm,
and I still read it to this day. I
mhm,
titled it "I'm Human." And it just went through looking at life in a much different perspective and understanding, um, who are we? What's our purpose here? And, what's the greater source that's out there, source, God, whatever. And I looked at things like nature, right? Nature's supposed to be loving and cruel and beautiful, but there's parasites, right? There's horrible death when an animal dies. That's not this beautiful, loving piece of nature. So this was like a big paradigm shifting moment for me.
mhm,
So that, led up to those experiences. And then my father died. And then I went into this other project. So that was me trying to take that mess in my brain and organize it in a way that not only I could follow, but somebody else could pick that up. I think it's a fairly easy read. And dissect this information and say, wow, okay, I understand this now, because it was a complicated mess of stuff that was in my head that I had to get out. It really helped me to understand it.
wow. Well, this is no, this is absolutely fascinating. It's just, it's just fascinating because to me it all makes sense.
Yeah.
Like it just makes sense. Like, oh, that's so logical. That's
Yeah.
so I could see that. I could just see that. That explains so much to me. I mean, I can buy that hook, line, and sinker. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it does when you look at it that way. And of course um there's other explanations. I encourage anybody out there, to continue to seek your own answers, as I know you've been
Absolutely.
doing, and we all do. Um, if I'm saying something that resonates with you, go with it. If it doesn't,
Mhm.
discard it. I mean, I think that knowledge and truth, um, serve us in different ways at different times. And something that might be my truth right now, which drives me into a certain direction of thought and action, may not serve me, a month from now or a year
Mhm.
from now. And
Mhm.
that's okay.
Yeah.
My saying at the end of every show on my podcast is let your intuition be your guide. So find those
Mhm.
things that resonate and explore that direction. I think you can find
Yeah.
a lot of value there.
Yeah. Let the follow, yeah. Follow those thoughts.
Yeah.
You.
Yeah. Yep.
Um, wow, we have time? Can you tell us about the future forecasting group?
Yes.
Mm,
So this is great. I'm so thankful for the opportunity I have. I still say I was just a guy in my basement. I was doing this podcast, and I was a truth seeker, just trying to figure out what's going on. And I'm really hung up on this AI thread and human consciousness. And I come across this YouTube channel of this guy, Edward Reardon. A lot of us will know who Edward is now, but he did this remote viewing session called Remote Viewing QAnon. Now, with remote viewing,
Was this during, excuse me for interrupting,
yeah,
was this during COVID, like our
this is
lockdown
this
or
is pre-COVID.
okay, all right.
Edward is an amazing guy. So for those that aren't familiar with remote viewing, for a viewer to do a project properly, the only thing that they're given is a target identification number. They have
Mhm,
no idea what the target is. So they'll usually get an 8-digit number. Sometimes it's alphanumeric. Sometimes it's six numbers, whatever, however your tasker is working. But you have a number, and that's it. That's all you're given. And you go through your process and you collect data. So Edward starts going on about this session. I'm watching his YouTube channel. He did multiple sessions on it, and he's talking about this society that's developing in secret, and they're working with this kind of nanotechnology. And what he concluded the conversation with was, at one point in the future, he foresaw a signal going out across the planet, and everyone's minds instantly changing. And I was like, whoa, this is the stuff that I'm having my own intuition about, not at Edward's level. I mean, he's something else, but that's where I was called to. So I sent him a random email and I said, "Hey, I'd love to have you on my podcast. It's a very small show. I didn't think you'd ever want to be on it." And he goes, "Sure." And we connected and we had this conversation. And it's probably one of the most impactful interviews I've ever done with Edward. It's impacted me in so many ways in thought and action. So I did this interview with Edward. It was a great conversation. And a few weeks later, he texts me randomly. He's like, "Hey, I got a guy that wants you to interview him." I was like, "Okay, I'm always looking for interesting people." So I interviewed this guy who was very mysterious, very knowledgeable, an insider type of guy. Um, and he was, I tease him nowadays because he was kind of toying with me. He knew what information I wanted, so he'd get me right there, and then we'd dance around. He wouldn't quite let me have it. So it was a great conversation that we had. But at the end of that, he says, "Dennis, this was a job interview. I wanted to see how you were as an interviewer, and we'd love for you to be a debriefer for our remote viewers." So it was at the time at the beginning it was Edward Reardon, Dick Allgaier, and Daz Smith. And again, I'm a guy in my basement who has watched these guys for the last however many years predict the future accurately and all these wonderful things that they did. Um, so to be asked to interview them every week and debrief their remote viewing sessions was just an incredible opportunity for me. And I really got to, I got to sit, I was like the master class. I got to be the little kid at the big kids table and just take it all in and then interview them about it. So I got to ask
Mhm.
any question I wanted as they're going through their data every week, and I've been with them since 2018. Um, and we went through COVID together. The team, they predicted so many elements of COVID. We still go back as new information comes out and look at those earlier sessions that the team did and see how the feedback is still coming in
Mhm.
from
Mhm.
COVID. So the future we were crypto viewing back then, and the company started really looking at our economy is shifting. Our economy is going from fiat currency to cryptocurrency. Um, and what we wanted to look at was what the team looks at is all the different cryptocurrencies are out there that are out there. They pick a different currency, every week, and they just look at it as remote viewers.
Mhm.
And they tell you how's it going to do. I mean, the ultimate goal is for our subscribers to be able to make some money. It's not
Mhm.
financial advice, but it's saying
Right.
here's some data that
Right.
might correlate in your decision making process. And they had great accuracy with the things that they were looking at. And that evolved, and we started doing world events where they look into the future every month to say what's going to be in the news next month.
Yeah.
I'm still floored every month when I just watch the episode and then I watch not just a random, like, oh, there's going to be a hardship, specific data points that come through. Celebrities dying, politicians dying, assassination attempts, war
Mhm.
that was unexpected, terrorist attacks, bombings, all this stuff. They get specific data points coming through. And then they also look at the mystery targets, whether it's I like the UAP targets, but then there's ancient history type of stuff. I think I tasked a target on Göbekli Tepe that was really cool to go back and have the viewers
Oh,
look at.
I
So
was just,
lots of different
I got
things.
to interrupt you. I was just there in March. Okay. I
Oh,
was like, oh,
wow.
yeah, I had to go see.
That's so cool. Yeah, they came back with like, Garden of Eden type of stuff in there and giants and all. It was really neat sessions the data that they brought
Mhm.
back on that one.
Mhm.
Um, just a lot of fun targets that they do. So we evolved into the future forecasting group, and now we have many more viewers on the team. I stepped out of the hosting role and I stepped into the podcast role, which is where I'm more comfortable. I like to take that one data point that's interesting to me, and then I can do a whole hour discussion on it. Where with the debrief, we need to keep moving and get through all the data points times
Mhm.
5 viewers. So I love being in the podcast position now. So that future forecasting group is just an amazing organization. It's a great community of people who are really trying. We all supported each other, and I don't mean just the employees. I mean our community
Mhm.
supported each other through COVID. It
Mhm.
was nice to have. We had advanced warning when people started panicking and going to the stores. We already had our supplies. We had, sometimes all you need is just a little bit of advanced warning to say, let me just be prepared for this. Not in a panic way, not let me go live in a bunker. just enough to have extra supplies, so I don't need to be out in the store with an unknown virus where everybody's rushing to buy toilet paper. So that was nice, having that support throughout that whole COVID
Nice, nice.
process. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember, I think it was during, well, it was probably, it had to be during COVID that I had Daz on my podcast when I was doing it
Uh-huh.
regularly. That was before COVID. And then
Right.
he invited me to come to his, I think it
His
was,
dad's chat.
yeah, the Friday night thing where they do the
Yeah.
news. Okay.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was talking, but they were going over the news, and I just sitting there watching is like, whoa,
Yeah.
there's some pretty cool things over there, that some people
Yeah.
have seen. Then later on, it turned out, I just remember there was this one guy, Josh, and I'm sure you know him now, Josh, when Josh
Yeah.
Malin, that's how I met Josh, actually sought him out. I didn't know who he
Yeah.
was, all right, but I had seen his remote view, and then I don't remember. I'm making up the details, but it was my first time on the show. I'm watching the show. I'm watching them do the news, and I see this thing that this guy with this big beard posts. Okay, and I catch his name, and then a couple weeks later, or maybe even a week later, the exact same thing that he had seen shows up.
Yeah.
So I gotta, who's this guy? All right,
Yeah.
so I went to seek him out, and then I had him on the podcast also,
Yeah.
and then now the rest is history, where he's going and what he's doing. But
Yeah.
it's just,
Josh is an amazing guy, by the way, just to give him a quick plug. Josh Maitland.
yeah,
He's
yeah,
yeah. He's
yeah.
a really cool guy with what he does.
Yeah, I've given him a lot. I give him plugs too, and I want people, I just want people to look at his work and check out his,
Hmm.
and just anyway, but it's great. I just love the community. The point was that it's the
Hmm.
community that I noticed. Okay, it was just like a
Yeah.
lot of really great people working together as a community on those calls, and
Yeah.
getting a lot of information, and still at the same time having a lot of fun while they're processing all that information, and
Yeah.
going through and all the data. All right.
Hmm.
Um, okay. Tell me now a little bit about what's next. Okay. I know that you're right, that you've written.
Hmm.
Um, are you writing now? Are you in the
Yeah.
process?
So here's what's cool. I just published the second installment of the Hive series that came out, I guess, about a month ago. And the neat thing about that, the first book, um, that was what some people say is, where is the line of fiction versus nonfiction? Because there was a lot that I couldn't disclose, when COVID was going on, based on the data we were getting from RV. But that was based on that book started based on that QAnon session I had for Edward. I was so
Oh,
stressed.
sorry,
Yeah,
somehow
that
we got off of that. Can you go back to that, please? Yes. All
yeah,
right.
absolutely. Yeah, I know there's so many rabbit holes and ways to go, right? Um, that session was an amazing session. It was an inspiration for me. So during COVID, I mean, that was a lot of stress. And that was a time when I'm just stepping into, like, really stepping in out of my own basement into, like, here's professionals, here's validation. And I'm watching these predictions every week come true later. So that's a really big paradigm shift. So I'm
Yeah.
having going through my process with that. COVID's happening. I'm a teacher. There's a lot of stress. And then Christmas week, my wife comes down with COVID, pretty bad. So now I'm really, I got 3 kids. I got to get them ready for Christmas. Like, all this stuff's going on. I'm just scrolling on social media. I said, you know what? I need to get this out in some fashion because I can't just blurt it all out. I started writing this book, The Hive, and it was all of that stuff in a work of fiction,
Mm-hmm.
in a story that I think is very entertaining. Going through, and the main character, his name is Edward, as a nod to Edward, who was the inspiration for the story. Um, and it just goes through this journey where, he's in a supermarket, and all of a sudden everybody gets sick at the same time except for him. The whole world instantly. How's that happen? Obviously, there was some other tech going on that everybody got infected, and so he goes through it. The first part, he meets a woman, and she's infected, and they go through this journey trying to understand what's happening. And then the second book, which I just finished, it explores more of the levels and nature of reality, bringing in AI and consciousness. And there's a love story intertwined in there as well. And then I just started, so I just published that, and now I'm working on the third installment of it, hoping to have
Hmm.
that out, by the end
Wow.
of the summer. So but
Nice.
that's been a fun project. Writing, I think, is very, very healing for me, and it helps me to understand the world around me, and the jumbled mess of thought that's in my head that bounces around all the time. So writing's a good way for me to process it without sounding too out there, I think.
Oh, wow. Can
Yeah.
we go back a second? Can we go back
Sure.
to the interview that the podcast that you did with Ed and QAnon? Can we go talk a
Yeah.
little about that? I'm curious. I mean, I know
Sure.
that there are some people who never even heard of QAnon, even after the fact, okay, that there was
Yeah.
HBO, HBO documentary on it, but
Right.
what was that like? And what was that? If in case anybody doesn't go back to listen to the podcast interview.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and again, you can find our interview, and you can find his raw sessions on his YouTube channel as well. Um, but it really, it wasn't this. I know people who follow it. There was like these drops and these all this other stuff going on,
Oh,
and
yes, I remember that. I
his
remember
data
that.
wasn't anything like that. His data was looking at something much deeper, much more
Mhm,
profound.
mhm,
Um, that like I said, that resonated with me, and it was this society that exists outside of our awareness, that's
mhm,
technologically advanced, that seems to be working on a product that will have an influence on consciousness. It's a
mhm,
very small product. So I don't remember all the specifics of it, but that we've done several. I think every time I interview him, we end up touching on that because he keeps getting
mhm.
more feedback on
Uh-huh.
that session. So
Wow.
it was a really neat experience to dive into that.
Wow. Okay. So curiosity piqued. I'm going to go back and look. I'm going to go listen.
Yeah,
And then we can put the link under on my YouTube channel also, and people can
sure.
go to you and they can find it on your channel, right? They're going to find
Yeah,
it too.
I'll
So,
send you the direct link to that interview so you can have it,
okay,
and I'll
awesome.
send you his information too.
And then you could put that there. Okay. So now book three is out and let's
Book two's out, book three's in the works.
I'm
Yep,
sorry. I'm ahead.
that's okay.
I'm a psychic. That's what I
That's great. I love it.
book three is out. So let's just talk about the Reiki training courses, okay? Because that's
Yeah,
a lot of fun. Um,
yeah,
my question now is, what does it take to be able to do all of this, okay? To write and to work and to be a dad and a husband and a
yeah.
reviewer, like what does it take? Well,
Um,
besides
I,
that wonderful chart that you have, okay, yeah.
Thank you. I think I'm really been diving into my own mind lately. I'm neurodivergent with ADHD, which I think is a superpower ultimately once you learn to harness it. But the way, our minds work with ADHD is we're constantly looking for stimulation. Our minds work very, very fast. We make connections quite easily, and we bounce from one project to the next. So I'll usually have 10 to 15 things that I'm working on a little bit here, and then I get bored and I move to this. So in some areas it looks chaotic, but I've developed systems where I can push through some of that chaos to actually get things done. Not always easy, but I think that's why I've done so many different things. It's ultimately, if we break it down to a chemical level, I think my brain's just looking for stimulation sometimes. And these things really interest me. With the Reiki, that's been such a healing experience for me. My wife signed me up to get my Reiki attunement, I think a year or two after my dad passed. And when I first learned about Reiki, I was like, what? This is some new age stuff that really just sounds like a money-making thing. I really had zero faith in it. It sounded ridiculous to me, honestly. Um, and I went through my attunement, I took the 1 day course, and I'm giving my first session to, my partner in training. I've got my hands up, and I'm like, this is weird, but I see purple lungs floating in front of me. And I'm just going to say it, like, I see these little purple translucent lungs. And she's like, I've got asthma, and I had an asthma attack 2 days ago, and I haven't recovered yet. I was like, oh my goodness. So through that, I started having it, really opened me up. And actually what Reiki did is it gave me control, because my intuitive stuff was just spontaneous, and I had no way of turning it on and turning it off. And Reiki taught me a little bit how to control that. Um,
Mhm.
So just recently, I've felt the confidence. Um, I've done a lot of private sessions for people for a variety of reasons, ranging from I'm sore to I'm depressed to I'm on hospice. So going through those processes, I said, okay, I think I'm ready. I want to teach. I'm a teacher, and I want to be able to teach Reiki and help people, gain the benefits of it and help them along on their journey and have conversations like this with people who are going, people who come to me and say, hey, I'm confused about this, or, what do you think about this? I love talking about this stuff if it helps people. So I got my certification as a Reiki teacher, as a Reiki master. I got attuned there. So I'm in the process of building a course through Udemy, it's
Yeah.
mostly self-paced, except I'll be able to connect for the attunement. And
Hmm.
then I'm also putting together an in-person Zoom course, and obviously for people that are local to where I'm at, an in-person course. And in the meantime, I've been doing virtual sessions, and I found that through my remote viewing training, it has really helped me with my virtual Reiki sessions because it feels like a combination of remote viewing and Reiki healing. I think I'm using remote viewing to access where I need to be, and
Hmm.
then throwing Reiki through that signal to
Hmm.
work with my clients, and it's been a really fascinating experience and enjoyable for me to be able to do that.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. I'm really happy and I'm
Thank you.
excited for you. It's really great.
Thank you.
We need more people doing this work. I mean, we need MDs and all of this too, but we need more
Right.
people being able to do this.
I
Um,
agree.
yeah, I'm gonna just bring this to myself a little bit. I recently, and I don't want to say came down with or can try, I don't have, this is not something that's going to be in my body for long, but I was in an car accident, and I don't know if that was the catalyst or if it was stress. It
Right.
says it's stress, yada, yada, blah, 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 right? Anyway,
Right.
bottom line is all of a sudden, I find that my body is experiencing tinnitus, right? And it's like, oh
Wow.
my God, I can't, like, I cannot hear. I cannot hear. I cannot think. I
Yeah.
have an explosion in my head. And I don't like to say those words because I'm a believer that our words create reality. So,
Yes.
okay, so now what am I going to do with this thing going on in my head? So, first thing, of course, I went and I do all the usual doctor visits, rule that take you name it, Dennis, you name a
Yeah.
doctor. Ellie went to visit, had
Yeah.
tests done, all of that. Anyway, where the healing has actually come through and with have been cranial sacral people, healers, Reiki healer. Okay, that's where it's at.
Yeah.
So, I
Yeah.
mean, once you can rule, and this is my advice, even, and I don't, it's not medical advice, nobody take it, okay? First you get your diagnosis from from a physician, find out like
Right.
what's clinically wrong so you can start to work on it, and then you can start going deeper.
Hmm.
Sometimes in those mystery illnesses, that's where Reiki, remote viewing, that's where
Yeah.
it's at, just absolutely so, so powerful,
Yeah.
My,
I mean, that's
mm,
the old shamans, right? People used to go to the shaman or the medicine man
yes,
to
that's right.
have that spiritual solution for their physical challenge
Mhm.
that they're going through.
It may not be good for, removing things from our body and things, like needing a doctor and going to the ER.
Right.
But
Yes.
still, for other conditions of suffering, okay, they're going to the shaman, getting yourself a Reiki session, cranial sacral, whatever it is,
Right.
just it's priceless. It's so priceless.
Yeah. Yeah, that that there's those releases that happen something. We store energy in different parts of our body, those blockages, which could be the cause of pain. It could be the recurring traumas. A
Mhm.
lot of my clients, they'll tell me after the initial session, they're like, I went home and about an hour later, I just sobbed like I've never cried before. I don't know where it came from. I just cried and then it was gone. And then I felt so much lighter afterwards. Yeah, that was the release. The Reiki gets everything going, and then you
Yeah.
have that release, or they'll have this dream, and the dream is the release, whatever happens in the dream. And all these different things happen to
Yeah.
people as they're releasing that energy. I think that's a very healing thing. Obviously, seek medical attention, get that as well. And I recommend we have to say that, and I mean that. But working in conjunction with Reiki, I mean,
Yeah,
cancer wards even now bring in Reiki practitioners because the data is
absolutely.
showing that it helps at a minimum with helping people face the fear and the anxiety, and it helps them to relax, which
Mm.
then puts your body in a better state to heal because stress on the body is not good, especially when you're going through cancer treatments.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's true.
Yeah.
Wow, Dennis, I know that we can talk forever,
Yeah.
uh, but I'm gonna wrap it up, but I don't want to wrap it up. So
Understood.
um, tell me. People want to find out more, they go to the websites, we got that. But again, everybody has their own beginnings for their own journeys.
Yeah.
So is there any kind of advice or suggestions that you may give people like to begin their
Yeah.
journey? What do you,
Absolutely.
what do you think?
A few things. Start with listen to your intuition. Find that voice.
Yeah.
And with that, you have to face your fear. And sometimes in the beginning, it's the fear of being wrong. But so when I say that, I'd have people in my life and I'd say, "Are you feeling this? Are you experiencing this?" Sometimes they'd say yes. I'm like, "Cool, I got a hit. I'm psychic." Sometimes they'd say no, and I'd be like, "Oh man, I guess I'm not psychic. It's my imagination." But I realized, wow, that's good information for me to know that whatever that feeling was isn't one I need to trust. If that's my imagination. So learn to trust your intuition and learn to face your fears. And sometimes those fears are a lot darker. Eventually, you're going to have to face them. And I'd also say, get some kind of reflection tool, whether you want to speak into a microphone for yourself, or I'm a huge fan of journaling. Just sit down and write just for you. I've got stacks and stacks of notebooks of journals that I've kept since I was a kid, just recording these experiences, helping me to understand them, helping me to remember them. Years later, you go back and you're like,
Yeah.
oh, this happened. And now I'm learning from it 15 years later because it's relevant to me now. So, learn to trust your intuition, face your fears, and write it down, I think is a great starting point.
Mhm, mhm.
And just go slow. I know we think about it and we say, "Oh, I want to be this great psychic wizard and be it," but you have to go through it. And there's value in going through it, because you're never going to get to the end of the journey. You're always going to be learning. There's always something new. Once you're like, I did it, you're like, oh, I got to do that next. There's always something else, so you can enjoy it for a moment, and then the next lesson comes on, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's a wild ride, and just go with it.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Um, Dennis, it's been a pleasure, and I'm so happy that I'm going to be able to upload a new exciting podcast. And you're so interesting. We're going to have to
Thank you.
talk more. We're really going to have to talk more. And
Definitely.
people, go look at Dennis's books and go check out Future Forecasting Group and all of it, and his website and everything else that we've spoken about. It is a wealth of information. All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you for being here. Dennis, thank you for being here with me tonight. And
My
everybody,
pleasure.
love and blessings to you.
Thank you, Ellie. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.